Barnsley. We are the two original starters of this group after the 2016 election. We started in January 2017, and we've been doing this for a year and 9 months. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Every week.
We've been doing it. And everywhere I go, as I said before, I see people. On Saturday, when I was so incredibly depressed, Saturday when I could barely keep my head up straight, I still did my door-to-door canvassing and talked to people. I saw people that I could actually have a conversation with. Then I went to the NAACP Freedom Dinner, and I'm glad I did, because then Professor Dyson got me laughing, but he was still right on the point. He was quite humorous, and I think he understood where we all were from that day. You know, I worked my whole career for women's rights, and I just saw, you know, women's rights going down the tube. So, once again, I always say that I'm so pleased that you all keep coming back here. You're kind of like my new friends. That's great. Just a reminder, today's the last day to register to vote. Last day, you can go online, you can get those forms turned in. There's a mail slot at the end of the Board of Elections parking lot. You can just slip it in there, get it in there before midnight. Early voting starts tomorrow. And from tomorrow until the 26th of October, the Board of Elections will be open 8 to 5. They will open up on Saturday, the 27th of October. They will be opened up 8 till 5. And so they don't have a whole lot, they have no Sundays until November 4th. And they will be open 1 to 5 that day. So most of the time, now when we get the week right before elections, then it'll be open from 8 till 7. So check the Hamilton County Board of Elections. I did have a chance on Saturday night to talk to Joe Mallory, who's with the Board of Elections. And we started discussing this absentee ballot issue. And he said, it's really true, what we talked about last week, is that so many absentee ballots are thrown out because they're incorrectly filled out. So it's really important, if you have friends or family that are going to be voting absentee at their homes, that somebody sits down with them and talks them through the process, that they fill out everything that they're supposed to fill out in a correct manner. Otherwise, you need to encourage them to get a ride to the Board of Elections, because I know whenever I go over there, I got somebody that's working with me one-on-one to fill it out correctly. So please, tell folks they really should have somebody side by side with them to fill that out. Just one announcement, CEJC usually meets the second Thursday of the month. They cannot meet this Thursday. They're going to meet next week on the 18th at the regular time, 6 to 7:30. So just wanted to let you know. And our speaker for today is Derek Bauman. He will be talking about issue 1. Oh, I just kind of thought to myself, Alberta handed me a whole list of all the speakers that we have had since the very beginning. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, we've had Michelle Dillingham, we've had Brian Gary, we've had Leslie Jones, and today we're getting Derek Bauman. I've just been so amazed that even though they didn't make it on the city council, these people are still fighting for we the people every day. And I want to thank you, Derek, and I want to thank all of them, because you are the true people that we need to have representing us in Cincinnati. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And now I'm turning over to Alberta.
I get to do announcements. I'm so excited. We have this, our paper doing yes on 1, no on 1. Just want you to know it's happening. It is happening. And just in case you don't know what 1 is, I have given you my ballot again. I keep putting it out, and if you don't want to take it home, please leave it, and I will use them because I'm going to give them to every person in my precinct. But if you go to the ballot, and on the back of the ballot, they have, back of the ballot, it says, official ballot, general election, page 2 of 2, Springfield L.O. And there it gives you in writing what issue 1 is. Just so you know, I don't want you to go into this this discussion today without actually knowing what issue 1 is. It's here. Everybody has a paper on your desk. I didn't put out as many as I have, but I wanted every paper to have, every desk to have one, so you have a copy of what issue 1 is. Okay, now just some other announcements. Why is it that the week before, or the week that voting stops, that they have all of these great meetings that are coming up? I have here an actual ticket. You can have this. It's for the Roberts Paideia Academy on the open house for immigrant and refugee law center. If there's anybody who wants a ticket now, mind you, this is for Wednesday, October 10th, which is tomorrow, the first day of voting. Is there anybody here who wants a ticket for tomorrow night? I have it. You'll just see me at some point. I have that ticket. And also, during the very same time, actually, I love this. This one is for dirty fossil fuel companies spent more than $260 million on a campaign, contributions and lobbying Congress. So on Wednesday, October 10th, there you go, at 6 o'clock, the same time as this other thing, you can, and it's also at 5 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Mountain, 3 p.m. Pacific. Join our partners at the Declaration for American Democracy for a Facebook Live discussion. Click here to reserve your spot. And at the top, I have an address. So if you want to do the same, there are 2 things tomorrow, same time, same place. I know there's more than that. Just wanted you to know that that was happening.
Can't hear you, cannot hear you.
Okay, I will, there you go, thank you. Let's see, my brother, Stanley, is back there on the video, and he's doing video. And if you want a copy of last week's video, you can see the people who were doing, we had for last week. I thought they did a really good job. Yes?
If anybody has voter registration forms that need to be turned in, I'm going over there.
Okay. So if you have voter registration forms, she's going over. Wait a second, here we go. We have toys for that child.
Next Wednesday, October 17th, at Lemon City Club is holding a meeting to discuss all of the charter amendments at First Unitarian Church, 536 Linton Street. Doors open at 6:30. The program starts at 7.
So make sure you fill out a card with Peter. Do you know where Peter is?
October 17th, Wednesday night, 7
He
o'clock.
has some notice on this one. It's already in the newsletter. Here we go.
This is on Election Day that Uber and Lyft are giving free rides to the polls, or at reduced rate, but you have to have the app and a credit card. But for those people who may not have a car and have a credit card, they can use that.
Very nice, very nice. Any other announcements? Bill Messer.
Is anybody running rides to the polls for people who don't have apps and credit cards, and especially people who aren't very affluent?
No.
No. Okay. I hear a voice in the back.
Right. Ronnie says she gives rides to the polls.
Yeah, over here.
I think you can just call to the Democratic Party and they will get you a ride.
No.
No? Who do you call if you want a free ride?
Acorn.
A friend.
Call a friend. Call a friend.
We raised this issue last night with Eduardo and the campaign. We raised this issue last night with Eduardo, who organizer for the Have campaign. He said he would look into it. I mean, they haven't done anything, but they're in principle committed to the idea of trying to collect names of people willing to do rides.
Actually, I just talked to somebody from the Aftab campaign yesterday, and I had talked about doing rides on election day, and they said they do not want to do that because if they are unable to fulfill their obligations, they're basically causing people not to be able to vote. So they do not want to get into that. The campaign doesn't actually want to do it.
I stand corrected.
Get a ride. And you can get a ride, not just on election day, you can get a ride anytime from, what was it, 8 to 5 on the Board of Elections. So Monday through Friday and whatever the weekend hours are, one weekend in November.
They will, the campaign may help people do early voting. So if you want to go to Norwich to vote, they may help provide transportation for that, but not on election day.
That would be good. I have an information sheet here on,
I do have
oh, go ahead.
I have tickets to the Trump rally on Friday evening. So I have two, so I think I may go, but if there's anybody who would like to join me, let me know. Yeah. So.
Are you wearing armor?
I don't know. You're not allowed to take any signs in.
I believe that.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting given the comment about all the professional signs that appeared. So yeah.
Supporting Trump, you mean? No signs are allowed in, but you're allowed
No signs are allowed in, but he made a comment about the anti-Kavanaugh people having professional signs, and it showed that they weren't actually activists, but it was George Soros.
Oh, yeah. Soros will not be allowed in.
Today is the last day to register people to vote, so if you are interested in working on registering people for new immigrants who are new citizens, I have a paper. Is anybody interested in a paper, any naturalization? I have papers here. So, and I have the address here on here. Who wants to do it?
Martha has a question.
Okay, Martha, go ahead.
Well, it's wonderful to go with Albert.
Point it straight at you.
It's one. Okay. It's wonderful to go with Alberta to the naturalization, and hundreds and hundreds of people have been registered by her and her whoever is with her. I did it one time. It's wonderful. I just wanted to throw this in about Katie's comment. Staying positive, trying to have fun while the country is in the ditch. I mean, we don't even have a country anymore. I mean, democracy is gone. But in fact, I'm just saying, I heard the funniest song I've ever heard. On Now This Politics, you have to see it on the web, I believe, although I was able to put it on my Facebook account. A young singer is singing a song, I would call it, it's a scary time for men. And she makes
Very
it
funny.
so, yeah, you've seen it. So look at that on the web. Now This Politics, I think it'll pop right up.
Scary time for men. Like women have been work dealing with this since a long time.
Willie Nelson also has a new song that's on the video. Vote him out.
Yes.
Vote 'em out.
Vote
Vote 'em out.
Yeah.
I think that's where I am.
Doesn't Trump own the copyright to that song?
He's going to keep it from being sung. I can give you that. Any other announcements?
We are having our monthly public meeting for the combined forces Move to Amend and American Promise, both of which are dedicated to getting the dark money out of politics. That's going to be happening Sunday, October 21st, at the First Unitarian Church, downtown Cincinnati, 536 Linton, to 2 o'clock. We plan to have a guest speaker there, and we're just making more people aware. You're welcome to come, and we're hoping we'll see you there. Secondly, early on, I bought a number of these, and I've got a whole bunch of them left, and I'm willing to give them to a good home.
You're talking give, I mean like free?
I'm going to give them away to a good home, but here's the caveat. You have to say to me that you are volunteering for a campaign and you were doing something besides coming to lunch. If you're willing to make that commitment to me, then you can have one, and not only that, I will throw in free an AFTAB sticker. Okay? So
An
just
offer you
come
can't
to me afterwards.
refuse. Go for it.
You're going to Elizabeth to wear the anti-Trump rally.
Where is the anti-Trump rally?
Lebanon. Oh, perfect place to wear a hat.
Oh, that's a good place to wear a hat.
When is it?
Friday evening.
Friday evening outside of what?
It's, no, it's Hamilton County, it's Warren County Fairgrounds.
Warren County Fairgrounds.
The 2 stereo microphones. I don't know if anybody will find this as funny as I did, but I was watching, I had a migraine the whole day that Kavanaugh was confirmed. But I was watching all of that, and I was watching how the Republicans, virtually to a man and woman, would just like avert their eyes from what was right in front of them. And it occurred to me that the Republicans have become the American not-see party. You like that? It's a little intense, but okay.
That is bad. Thank you, Bill. I don't know if the not see. I definitely get it. Okay, any other announcements? And without further ado, now with that paper that I have in front of you, you have the written form in front of you, we are coming into our speaker. Our speaker is Derek Bauman, and he is Bauman.
Yeah, that's the good German pronunciation.
Okay, and without further ado, Eric Bauman.
Derek Bauman, am I saying it right? Derek Bauman, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, one more time. Good afternoon, Greater Cincinnati Dems. Fired up. I hope so. If we're not, I'm not sure who is. You know, I've had the pleasure to come here and speak to you on a number of topics. Public transportation is one of my big issues. Of course, the council campaign last year, and we did so well, and we'll do even better next time. But having said that, you know, I was a police officer for 26 years. I saw. Closer. Is this better? Yeah. I saw firsthand the failure of our war on drugs. Ultimately, to me, that's what issue 1 is about. Addressing that in a real way here in the state of Ohio, and actually being taking a fair leadership role across the country on that. Now, I gave you a handout. If anybody doesn't have it, there's a number of them floating around out there. These are basically some talking points. To be honest, and even for myself, going over the information before I came here to speak to you today, there's a lot in there. There's a number of pieces of law that this will change and this will impact. We'll get into that. Let's first start out with a couple statistics to put some numbers to all of this. Ohio spends roughly Ohio spends approximately $1.3 billion with a B dollars a year to incarcerate roughly 50,000 people.
Wow.
This is we have one of the highest incarceration rates of any state across the country. The only states with higher incarceration rates are generally in the southeast. You kind of get the picture there, right? In 1980, we had roughly 14,000 people incarcerated. So 3 to 4 times now our prison population up from 1980. The reality is, a lot of these folks that are in prison, as some estimates, Policy Matters Ohio, which I would direct you to their website, they have a great analysis of issue 1, Policy Matters Ohio, estimates that we might be able to reduce that number by up to as many as 10,000 people, 20% of our prison population, by doing primarily what issue 1 does, and that is reclassifying low-level felony drug possession, not trafficking. Key difference, not trafficking, not the drug dealers, but somebody who possesses a low-level felony amount of drugs to keep them out of prison. In other words, a prison sentence would not apply to them unless there's something else going on there. They've got a gun, if there's some other crime that they're committing along with the drug possession, then they still could be on that basis. Or if they're trafficking, if they're dealing drugs, then all of that still applies. But for somebody who's simply a user, you know, and again, I saw it in my career, we are not going to arrest our way out of curing the addiction crisis. Okay, this is it's a public health issue, it's a mental health issue. But what we're trying to do here with issue 1 is reduce that number, and in so doing, saving a significant amount of money. And then issue 1 further has language that redirects the majority of that savings to treatment. And I think ultimately that is our way forward, rather than continuing down this rabbit hole of the school to prison pipeline. We know this impacts people of color disproportionately. We know also that it impacts women disproportionately when you look at the numbers of women who are in prison, even higher numbers in terms of they're there for simply drug possession. So we want to get these folks who may have addiction issues and those types of things, we want to get them treatment. We want to get them help and not just lock them up at a cost roughly $73 to $75 per day per inmate in Ohio's prison system. And well, we get off into other tangents and talk about the for-profit prisons and all of that, but you know, at the end of the day, you follow the money with these things. So that's a couple of things that it's going to do. Further, there is language in there incentivizing folks who are in prison to undertake programs, whether they be educational, vocational programs, or treatment programs that are offered within the system, and enable them to reduce their sentence by about 25%. Is that right, David? By the way, David, many of you know David Little, longtime activist and capital D Democrat here in Cincinnati. He's actually working on issue 1 statewide. And so if I get off track at all, please feel free to correct me, or if we have any questions that I can't answer, David's here as a great resource as well. And then finally, we talked about investing those savings. Where does the money go? There's also language in there that says to the legislature, this doesn't mean you take the money and spend it someplace else. That it is supposed to supplement funds already going to these treatment type programs, and this would be new money in addition to that from the savings that we have from reducing that prison population. But I can recall instances in my career where, for whatever reason, you run into someone and for drugs like, let's say, for example, cocaine, you can have a small amount. If it's enough to test, they're automatically charged with a felony. And we know that during the 1980s, when that prison population started to explode, much of that was because of crack. and then much of that enforcement action was taken upon and very devastating to African American communities, really across the country, but across the state of Ohio. And so you can have this much cocaine, you're arrested on a felony, convicted of a felony, you may go to prison, but then think of all the outcomes after that. Trying to get a job. There are 200, 250 different classifications of careers that you simply can't get with any kind of a felony conviction. And that stuff stays with you. You know, maybe someday in the future you can get that expunged. That takes attorneys and other things. The reality is, the impacts that we have had on our communities, on people, particularly our communities that are at most at risk, it's been devastating. And so we have, you know, essentially generations of folks, and once you get into that pipeline, it's really hard to get out. You get out, you can't get a job. What do? You have to eat, right? Put food on the table. Drug offenses, you typically lose your driver's license. Kind of dovetails back into our public transportation conversation, right? You can't get, yeah, so, and housing, all of these types of things. So, I myself am supporting issue 1. Wendell Young, Councilmember Wendell Young, Senator Cecil Thomas, both former police officers, are supporting issue 1 as well. And Rich Cordray, our fantastic gubernatorial, that was pretty good, gubernatorial candidate for governor, has also endorsed issue 1. So again, I would urge you to go to, if you have time, go to Policy Matters Ohio. I don't recall their exact, if that's the exact name of their website, but if you Google Policy Matters Ohio, issue 1, it'll come up. Also, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative has some great information on their website that goes into much greater detail on this. But the general gist of it is, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we're not going to put people in prison for low-level felony amounts of drugs. But if you're a trafficker, if you're a drug dealer, this doesn't apply. I think that's been kind of some of the spin out there from the opposition. And that's not the case. You say, well, what's the difference between, you know, legally, what's the difference? Generally speaking, if you have the drugs that are packaged for sale, or there are items along with that that would lead a reasonable person to believe that this person is selling drugs, then that's going to be trafficking. In other words, if you've got bundles and bales, or if you've got a bunch of whatever type of drug it is packaged up, ready for sale, you've got scales there, you've got all of these different types of paraphernalia, then that's not going to apply. Your state prosecutors are still going to be able to charge people with drug trafficking. This is for people who simply possess the amount, that they're users, that they're addicts, and that the best place for them is not in prison at great cost, not only to the taxpayer, but great cost to our society in the long run. I think this is a good way to go about addressing that. David, as a matter of fact, just showed me a poll that just came out. Is this correct? That just came out? Just came out within the hour. Issue 1 is actually leading, per this poll, by about 17 points. So with that, I will open the floor up to any questions. I'll answer to the best of my ability, and David will tag team with me on that.
Can you help us with the lies on TV about, you know, they're going to let out all these vicious serial killers and stuff? So you just said that they can still charge people with trafficking, which is they're lying about on TV, and low-level amounts, which they're lying about too. Doesn't it make you crazy to see these sheriffs and people lying about this on television? And what would you say if you were with them?
Well, first of all, it's not coincidence that you usually see the sheriffs, because sheriffs, being an elected office, they can speak politically. There may be a lot of police officers out there, and this is why you see recently retired police officers speaking to the subject. If you're a City of Cincinnati police officer, there are department policies that basically keep the cops from going out and speaking on these political issues. The sheriffs can talk about it because it's elected office.
Troopers in uniforms that you see on the end talking about.
And yeah, I can't explain that. I do know there is specific, correct me if I'm wrong on this, David, there is specific language in there to talk about, doesn't apply to murder, doesn't apply to child molestation, doesn't apply to rape specifically. But to me, the bottom line is this is talking about drug possession. You know, typically if somebody gets, a lot of times, I arrest somebody for whatever the crime is. Let's say it's a domestic violence or an assault. And then you're patting them down, or you're searching them, or you're called into their house, and you also find some type of drug that they have in their possession. Okay, they're still, this doesn't apply to the other crimes that they're charged with, whatever they may be. This is simply about the drug possession. So we're looking to try to impact the people that are going to prison for nothing more than possession of a small amount of drugs, then which gets them into this whole lifestyle, this life cycle, and that you're in that, you've got that hanging over your head for the rest of your life, no matter what happens. And you know, if we think about it, the impacts then on the family, if a breadwinner can't earn money, or even if it's a father that's paying child support and can't get a job, and now it's impacting the family in that way, and what are the long-term impacts on the children? You know, we don't even know. You connect the dots on all this stuff. So in my view, this is just a way for us to really take a bold step in reducing what's been the war on drugs since the 80s.
I have a question back here. I'm totally for issue 1. I think it's really necessary to stop this incarceration, profiteering. But the question I have is about who's going to be responsible for assuring that the drug treatment programs that come with the money saved from incarceration are reliable, because I've read about some of the scams in drug treatment in Florida and some other states. So I think it's going to be important that we have a good system in place.
David, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I really can't speak exactly to that matter, but most certainly we would have a new opportunity to create a system from the ground up with these new funds. Clearly there are not enough treatment centers now, there are not enough people in treatment, but the new system that would take place under issue 1 would increase the funding, increase the beds, increase the treatment facilities and treatment providers, and I would think it would behoove us all to make sure that they are playing straight and that there are no legal loopholes so that people can exploit this situation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Peter's got it first. Peter's got the mic.
Thanks, Peter. Let's see, I run a methadone program in Ohio, in Cincinnati. Been affiliated with it for 40 years. There are state laws in Ohio that regulate treatment. The Ohio Department of, what is it? They keep changing the name. Mental Health Addiction Services, that's what it is. And they license folks to make, I don't know what's going on in Florida down there, but in fact they would license folks in Ohio, and we're over-regulated. They come in and take a look at us at least once a year and check our records, and DEA regulates us as well. That's the federal police. And so I think in Ohio, if in fact folks are operating a drug treatment center, you can assume that they're well regulated. Thanks.
Peter's got the mic here. Yeah. Peter has it here.
Back here.
Let Peter.
I'll repeat the question.
Peter's got the mic. All right. Peter's got the mic. Peter has the mic.
Oh, Peter.
Peter. No, I'll get Peter's mic and take it.
Derek, whoever has the mic gets to talk.
You hold the mic, Derek. You hold the mic.
Ground rules down here.
Speak, Peter. Speak.
I read this interview with one of Nixon's close aides who claimed hearing Nixon say, of course, blacks are the problem, but we have to invent something that people won't realize what it is, and that's the war on drugs. And the blatant racism of it really strikes me. But I recall listening to Bessie Smith's song in the 20s saying, "Give me a reefer and a gang of gin." There was nothing illegal about marijuana in the past, but that became the vehicle for more and more drugs being declared illegal.
Well, I use the example of Sam DuBose. In my opinion, the Sam DuBose incident, there's a lot of moving pieces to it. But, he had some marijuana in the trunk. And ultimately, I think that led to decisions made on his part and the officer's part that put attention on that situation that didn't have to be. And so to me, you had that not punishable by a felony. Sam DuBose might still be alive today. What I'm saying is it puts people in scenarios to where any small decision can end up very badly for people, for victims, for suspects, and also for police officers. And there are more important things that we need to be focused on than just arresting people for these small amounts of drugs. Quite frankly, it's a misuse of very scarce resources. And so I agree, before issue 1 ever came about, that we spend too much on the enforcement angle and not enough on the treatment angle to keep people out of this position to the extent possible in the first place. Yes, sir.
Such a presentation, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I was listening to the debate for the governorship last night, and Mike DeWine said, in fact, I think it's the only issue he referred to. He referred to it at least 2 times, how much he was opposed to it.
Can't hear you louder.
Mike DeWine last night on the debate between the governor candidates kept indicating his total support for against issue 2. All right. Against issue 1, and he said that if this is passed, he said drug users from all the states around Ohio are going to swamp Ohio, and you basically implying utilizing all of our resources, blah blah blah. To me, this is a non-debatable issue of the importance of this issue. I just haven't imagined how there could be such opposition. The Enquirer said last week it's like 50-50. I'm so glad to hear the poll today. But we still have to work very hard to overcome this. It makes me very suspicious about who is paying for this. I assume that the for-profit prisons are totally behind this. And I'm wondering who else, because it's just, law and order people for sure. But do you have any other information about that?
Well, and I'm going to let David specifically answer that question, but in general, I worked very hard for David Pepper in his Attorney General race in 2014, and the reason being, at that time, I was still actively working the road. I worked the road for the city of Mason up until 2016 when I retired. I was there, I've seen the people dying from overdoses, opiate overdoses, and seen them revive from Narcan, and the impacts on the families and the community. And yes, that's in a place like Mason. And Mike DeWine had zero plan to deal with opiates and heroin. David Pepper had a great plan on his website. I think it's still up, back from 2014. Okay, so in my view, Mike DeWine has zero credibility when it comes to talking about these issues. We've had over 5,000 overdose deaths a year in the state of Ohio. We're one of the top states in the nation. We're not leading in many categories, but we're leading in overdoses, as if that's something to be proud about. Under Mike DeWine's watch. I will also submit to you that the Ohio FOP has endorsed Rich Cordray. So, yes, a round of applause for that, please. So, in my view, whatever he's saying, and he just has no credibility, in my view.
Well, I'll try and clear up a couple of things. And this is a political group. This is the Democratic group. I'm a Democrat. This should be a nonpartisan issue. let's be clear, I think that the Republican ticket deserves to be defeated. I think that we have an outstanding slate, and I think they're terrified. So what are they going to do? Let's find something that stirs people up and magnify it and lie about it. How many times have we seen this? The only way George W. was reelected in 2004 was the fear of gay marriage that they put on in Ohio. Issue 1 is the new gay marriage amendment for this election. Mike DeWine is spending a fortune tying Richard Cordray to issue 1. They even call issue 1 Cordray's plan. Well, clearly that is not the case. But it is a plan that is endorsed widely across the state. But take a look. Every Republican who was supportive in the spring has somehow managed to change sides. And so now we have DeWine and his entire crew that have frankly done nothing over a large period of time. 7 years ago, they asked for a study of the opiate crises, what could be done with incarceration, et cetera. 7 years. They came back with a plan, gave it to the legislature, and what did the legislature do? Nothing. Why do we have constitutional amendments? Because this legislature does nothing unless they're paid to do so. So, frankly, our money is coming from foundations. It's coming from Zuckerberg. It is coming from, some of it's coming from George Soros. And the reason for that is that progressives tend not to have deep pockets. And we have some individuals who are wealthy enough that believe in positive social change to invest in places like Ohio, and for that we should be thankful.
So to me, the bottom line is, if you think what we've been doing for the last 30 years is working, then vote no on issue 1, right?
Back here.
Yes.
My original question was what he addressed. Who would put out money to oppose this issue, because it's so logical? But when you were talking about the fear, there's a book called Chasing the Scream about Henry Ansling, after the Prohibition, worked like Trump. He kept saying things over and over again that were not true. One of his that if black men smoke reefer, they'll rape white women. He's the start of that. He also illegally arrested 24,000 doctors for prescribing methadone, which was legal at the time. So he was a very Trump-like character, very dangerous, and we're still fighting his work, actually.
Okay, we'll keep it back here for a minute.
I have a question about even small possession amounts being a misdemeanor. It seems to me that one should have the liberty to do privately those kinds of things. So has there ever been any discussion about it not being criminalized?
I'm not aware of any. I don't know if you are, David, but I think what this is a strong step in that direction. So in other words, in these instances, it could still be charged as a misdemeanor, but we're not charged, because with a misdemeanor, for those that don't know, you can be sent to your county jail, but not to prison, to a state prison. That has to be from a felony conviction. So I just think this is a step in that direction. Are we headed toward what it seems that we are with marijuana, right? Heading towards a day of full legalization across the United States. So I think this is just a bold step in that direction.
So I have a comment and a question. I heard, I believe yesterday on the radio, some spokesperson, I only had it on for about 20 seconds before I got outraged and turned the radio off again.
WLW?
No, it was on WVXU, but they had we need to have the opposing viewpoint person on. And I turned it on and they said something, and the spokesperson said something to the effect of, we're gonna empty out the prisons and fill up the morgues. And then I turned the radio off again, because I just couldn't.
That's the coroner in Warren County.
Is that who that was?
Pardon me, Butler County.
Anyway, so that outrageous statements are hard to talk talk people down from. But the question was, can you talk through some of the other arguments against issue 1 and ways that you can help convince other people that those sorts of arguments aren't really valid?
Well, specifically to that one, I have actually seen with my own 2 eyes the scenario where people with especially opiate addictions or heroin addictions go to jail and prison. Now, first of all, that stuff is making its way into the jails and prisons. And so don't think that that doesn't happen. It does. The way they smuggle things is crazy. But clearly at a lesser rate. So I have seen a scenario where somebody goes into jail, serves some period of time. In that time, they dry out. Maybe there's some type of treatment programs. Maybe there aren't, or wherever they're at. And then they come out, and it's similar to even with alcohol. If you if you don't drink for a while, you're a teetotaler, right? You have a glass of wine, and whoa, you're loopy. It hits you. If you're a little bit of a social drinker, maybe it takes 2 glasses before you feel that. And so what happens is when they're in there, their tolerance actually drops because with the opiates, it can only take a small amount to get high. And so you come out, you take the same, because you're still an addict when you get out of prison, you take that same amount or that same dose that when your tolerance was higher because you were using consistently. Now you're overdosing. So in that sense, being in prison maybe fills up the morgues. It's the opposite of what he's saying. So to me, it's hyperbole. And what's the basis? Where's this research? Behind that? To me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
There were 2 questions at this table. There was one here.
Mine might have been answered by now. I just wondered if you were getting any support or what the current status is with proposals to legalize marijuana and what you're trying to do, the federal proposals, and if somehow you could tie it to scientific understandings or whether it's really a danger for someone to use small amounts of the controlled substances. And they're only trying to do obtaining and use. And sale and trafficking is not subject to what?
That's correct. It's use and possession, not sales and trafficking. So kind of going down that, talking about marijuana a little bit. As David mentioned, our legislature doesn't do anything unless they're backed into a corner. I think they saw the handwriting on the wall in terms of legalization, and they moved on their own to do this half step of the medicinal, and they've drug their feet on that in the actual implementation.
Worst law in the nation.
But they saw the handwriting on the wall, so they tried to do that to say, well, we'll give this much and maybe they'll go away on the full legalization. I think if you look at it in the big picture, I was recently over the summer out in Denver and out in LA, and I mean, it's like a coffee shop and people go in there, and it's not the end of the world in Denver. Like, actually, Denver's a pretty successful city these days. And so I just think all of this reefer madness hype that was mentioned, from a century ago, it's just garbage. I mean, it just is. And in the big picture, and then there's the health benefits, right? We have kids with seizures and people with chronic pain, which is a lot of start of the opiates in the first place. There's different things such as balms and different things that you can use if you have chronic, like a knee replacement or these kinds of things. And keep people off of opiates in the first place, right? So I don't know, maybe David, you do, of any moves for full legalization in Ohio right now, other than to say, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20, I think the handwriting's on the wall, that the tube's not going back in the toothpaste for that. It's just how long is it going to take us to get there? That's my sense.
Right in front of you here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I just want to clarify comments that were made by the woman and you about marijuana. Harry Anslinger is the man you're referring to. And he was one of the, or if not the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And marijuana was perfectly legal in this country until around 1936. And that was around the time of the release of Reefer Madness. And when Harry Anslinger was picked to head the department, he was totally in favor of prohibition, and he was totally in favor of eliminating all drugs. And he went on the war path. And he used an example of a man that had committed murder, had murdered his family, and once, months or years before, had smoked marijuana. And he used that as a tool to keep the laws in this country archaic concerning marijuana. This is all detailed in a book called The New Prohibition, which I happened to read when I was right out of college. And it was written by a man named John Kaplan, who was the Attorney General for Ronald Reagan. And Reagan, in the late 60s, asked for a commission to rewrite the drug laws where necessary. And Kaplan rewrote all the drug laws, and the only laws that he changed were the ones on marijuana. And he recommended at that time to Reagan that all of the laws concerning marijuana, that marijuana essentially be decriminalized. The environment wasn't such they could say legalized, but he wanted to decriminalize all the laws. And Reagan read the report, and by the way, this man did medical studies, he did all kinds of studies in order to make this conclusion. This is 50 years ago, and Reagan dismissed the report. And so he felt like he couldn't do it, I guess, politically. But that's the history of John Anslinger, but it's outlined in that book.
What an ass slinger, huh?
If all senior citizens carried a little marijuana and turned themselves in and filled up the jails with
Civil disobedience.
if we could get a movement going and
Stocking Frito-Lays going up as we speak. David, do you have a comment to add?
Well, I was simply going to talk about.
Wait, the microphone,
Just briefly, I was going to say that when marijuana became illegal, it was primarily blamed not only on black people, but on brown Mexicans, who, actually had a historic tradition of smoking pot from Mexico. But the real push, the real reason they needed to hurry up and make it illegal is because they needed to put an end to growing natural hemp, like they were in Kentucky. So nylon had just been invented by DuPont, and DuPont needed to get rid of natural competition. So marijuana became a vehicle to ban hemp, which freed up nylon for incredible profits for corporate America. That's how we got anti-drug.
Didn't World War II change that a lot?
World War II absolutely put nylon in. All those parachutes and everything else became nylon as opposed to natural product.
I think I've got the next question.
You do.
Actually, it's more of a statement than a question. I've talked to some people who theoretically are for issue 1, but they're hung up on this whole good government thing of it shouldn't be a constitutional amendment, and therefore they're against it. And of course, I'm thinking we can't count on our legislature to do anything, which is why most of us are for it as a constitutional amendment, because otherwise it won't happen. And I've tried to convince these people who like what it's written there, but just get hung up on that good government thing as to, why we can't afford to wait another 30 years. But what can you say to them?
Well, if they think that what the Republicans have been doing in Columbus for decades now is good government, I'm not sure what to say. I mean, where do we go from there? ECOT, any number of directions. I don't know. I think we just go back to the same thing, waiting for Columbus to act. It's not going to happen, not on this issue.
Speaking of Republicans, they say big government doesn't work, elect us and we'll prove it. That's kind of what they do. But getting back to the drug issue a little bit, there's a lot of crazy information about drugs out there. For instance, The drug that kills more folks than all the rest of them put together? Cigarettes. That's right. All of them put together. And it's legal, and and when I was a kid, it was cool. And there was a lot of money behind selling it, and we had at least one Surgeon General say that it's as addictive as heroin. I don't know how to measure that exactly, but that was his point. Every culture that people have created has had at least one substance associated with it. Usually a substance and a religion, they've all had. And usually they're connected. That's why they call it spirits, right? And so there's a lot of really crazy information out there about drugs. I really need to get some things straight and see how it's used to, in fact, push other political, economic issues. Thank you.
Follow the money. That's what it sounds like, as usual. Follow the money. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say in response to her question is that the people have been trying for a long time. People who are very familiar with these issues have been trying for a long time to get our politicians to respond to this issue with appropriate legislation. And we had to revert to the ballot. We just had, that's the only way we could make a change. Yeah.
I didn't hear that, but.
I thought Cordray had a good response to DeWine when I think he called him a fentanyl failure. Do I remember that correctly? Yeah. Good morning.
Last question.
It sounds kind of like a dumb question, but I don't remember the answer to this. The slate, Derek, you gave me, and I'm giving out around my neighborhood, the slate of Democratic candidates, going to Democratic homes, nothing on there about issues.
No.
Now, so, I don't remember, do parties
Sometimes.
endorse? So has the Democratic Party endorsed issue 1?
The Hamilton County Democratic Party has endorsed. About 4 weeks ago. The state party, as usual, is dragging their feet. And the reason that your sample ballots in Hamilton County do not have vote yes for issue 1 on there, even though we are paying for them, they're being printed through the state party, and they lollygagged for 2.5 weeks, and there were people within the state party, how can I say this politely, that simply worked hard to slow this, and our people locally, our party leadership fought hard, but the deadline passed and it was not included.
But the Hamilton County Party did endorse it.
Yeah, well, I'm giving out a slate that doesn't mention it.
Right.
To 200 homes.
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
81,000 of those did not get delivered with the yes on issue 1 because of the state parties.
Yes, we gotta get, that's our first order of business after the elections is to denounce the Ohio Democratic Party. Denounce.
Final question.
Okay, I just feel like this thing about warehousing so many African Americans because of crack cocaine is a racial thing, and that we're going to have a lot of people who will use whatever they have as an excuse, but they don't want to see all these people out voting, and I don't know, I just think there's some reason why they liked them all locked up.
The prisons make a lot of money for a lot of people. It's not just private prisons. I know, I write to an inmate who makes 40 cents an hour assembling brake pads for Honda. Now think what a deal that is for Honda.
Okay.
I'm just going to add that about 10 years ago, I saw the Assistant Chief of Police for the City of Cincinnati. This was at a time when there was a lot of talk about spending $100 million to build a new prison, and he actually said 80% of the inmates in the jail in Cincinnati were there for drug-related crimes, and it just hits you in the face, okay? We don't have room for all the prisoners, and 80% of them are there for drug-related crimes, but we want to spend $100 million to build yet a new prison? It's just so obvious what you have to do.
Agreed. So, thank you, everybody, and let me leave you with this final comment. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my judicial slate. I've got some title, I don't know what it is. With the court, we've never done this before in Hamilton County, and that is we have a very strong, organized slate of judges, and we're actually working together to do that. One of our challenges is, and please take this information with you when you in your travels. A lot of folks don't realize that when they vote their straight D ballot, that when they get down to the judges, then they get confused because there's no D or R there. 25% of the people that will vote a straight ticket don't vote for the judges because they don't know. And that's why the coordinated campaign is pushing this slate out with all of our endorsed judges. So if you can help us take a sign, get these slate cards out, make sure people take it with them when they go to vote so they don't vote for the wrong team or just don't vote, that would be fantastic, and we would greatly appreciate that. If we can shrink that 25% down, we can get our judges in. Thank you.
New slate cards have Supreme Court judges on there too, so that's why these are really important to hand out.
Very important. Thank you. One minute, I get the direct billing on here. Somewhere here I have a, direct billing of your name.
All the judges are so much Our slate cards and
We've done it again, folks. You have spent a perfectly wonderful Tuesday luncheon with us, the Democrats of Greater Cincinnati. You have done very well. You have behaved well, almost. Thank you for participating. Thank you for the wonderful questions. Thank you, Derek Bauman, for a wonderful program. We want to vote one. We want to vote yes on issue 1. Next week, hold your hostility, because we need to be nice to the person who's going to come and talk to us about no on issue 1.
That is if they respond back to me, but if they're not going to be here, I might have a surprise in my pocket. So
there you go. If they don't want to show up,
2 surprises possibly in my pocket.
we're scheduled for a no, folks. So that's the way it is. But Katie tells us, that whatever's scheduled doesn't happen if it doesn't happen.
That's right.
So thank you for coming. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you again. Bye-bye.